On Sunday afternoon we visited Stonehurst Farm, which is run by Mr. and Mrs. Greg Duffin. This is the only farm now left in Mount Sorrel. As we entered the farm we came across many old items of machinery and equipment. There is also a tea shop on the premises. We found it to be a great place to spend a pleasant couple of hours that Sunday afternoon.
Several families were present that afternoon, and it was interesting to see the mix of old memorabilia such as old phone boxes and obsolete farming implements, and even a range of antique petrol bowsers on display.
The Motor Museum housed a penny farthing bike amongst a variety of old style motorbikes. There was also a range of vintage cars. Some were obviously in good order as they could be hired for weddings and special functions.
Some heavy machinery was also on display. Many small vehicle engines and parts were to be seen. And we caught sight of an old horse-drawn baker's cart among the motorcycles.
Some old toy cars were also on display amongst all of these vehicles in the museum.
Out in the animal section, among the barns and pigsties, we found this one pig roaming outside of the sty. We looked up the encyclopedia on pigs, but could not determine with any accuracy which breed of pig this was.
Passing the lambing pen, we noted that several recently born lambs were contentedly grazing with their mothers on the fresh hay.
A newborn lamb bathed in the glow of a heat lamp in the barn.
Moving to a shed which was named Cuddle Corner, we found pens of rabbits and guinea pigs, where young children had the opportunity to touch and discover the feel of these small furry animals at their leisure.
An area has been set aside for children to amuse themselves on various items of interesting playground equipment for when they tire of wandering around the farm animals.
As previously stated, we believe that Stonehurst Farm is the only working farm left in Mount Sorrel. In earlier years, farming had played a large part in the life of the village. We read where the Pepper and Scott families carried out farming here in the 1800s. I believe my Aunt Vera was very friendly with a Phyllis Pepper, who lived at Home Farm, opposite my grandparents' place in Crown Lane, back in the early 1900s.
It seems that farming land in Mount Sorrel has given way to buildings in recent years. We learned that when farming was carried out here in the 1800s, cattle and goats were imported from Ireland and ponies from Wales. Also that harvesting of corn and grass was all carried out by hand. Irish labourers were brought in at times to help the locals cut corn and dig potatoes.
We continued filming around the property amongst the various old items of machinery and sheds, and seemed to upset one of the donkeys when we turned our backs on him.
He was, however, soon pacified by another visitor.
A blacksmith shop was also part of the farm display, and by the look of these old horseshoes piled at the bottom of the anvil, one could easily believe that horses played a major part in village life and on the farms back in the past. A collection of smithy's implements in this building emphasised the incredible arrangement of shaping and moulding tools that must have been needed for the blacksmith trade. We read that there were 2 blacksmiths in Mount Sorrel in the late 19th century. It is recorded that at one time, one of the blacksmithing businesses was named The Forge and was one of the most modern in the area, able to do welding, general and wrought iron work, and also agricultural repairs.
We moved into the farm shop, where many items of produce were for sale. Mr. Duffin showed me some black and white photographs of locomotives used at the quarry in the early 1900s, and remembered well one named Doris, on whose wagons they as children would hitch a ride as the engine passed. The grandfather's name.
My grandfather's name, yeah.
There's a good chance he's on there if he was doing something to do with the engines.
They're beautiful clear photos.
Yeah.
See right into,
Yeah, that's where they're putting a new line in, I think. That was where they were putting the line into Swithland. That's down in the actual quarry itself, where they're blasting it out. That's one of the old engines. Doris, I can remember Doris. I can remember Doris coming across the bridge over the main road. Because as kids, we used to sort of wait for it to go by, then jump on the last truck and sit in the last truck.
Later that Sunday afternoon, we called on Mr. Noel Wakeling, who we were told had gathered a lot of the past history of Mount Sorrel. To our delight, he had a copy of the 1881 census paper, from which he was able to provide us with some very useful information about my great-grandparents and their family.
There it is. Mount Sorrel North End, so that's that direction.
Right.
George Yates, Miller. In 1881, he'd be 38.
Right.
Then there's William Yates, Joseph Yates, Susan Yates. You said he was a miller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all I've got. George Yates, whose occupation was a miller.
Yeah.
So he...
He got.
well, that's a little more information. I'll just write that down.
You're right for paper and.
Yeah, I've got a little book in here, a little notepad actually. So.
Yeah, there's a continuation of it here as well.
Alright. So.
We've got a son Edward at that stage.
George.
Now this, you've got to take this as being. This is dated 1881.
So that's the census, wasn't it?
This is the British. This is the most concise British census ever done.
Really?
1881.
1881.
Right, George Yates.
Yeah. Mount Sorrel North End, now Loughborough Road, that is, of course.
Mm. It's on the tape anyway, though.
Okay.
So at that
And that's
date,
it. He was 38
at that date, George Yates was a head miller, and his age was 38. He was born in Retford, Nottinghamshire. Retford, R-E-T-F-O-R-D.
Oh, great. Oh, well, that's
Now-
giving us a little more.
Now his wife, she was 4 years older than him, but her name was Hiner, H-I-N-E-R. But it doesn't give a name before marriage.
Heine.
Yeah.
You
Name.
haven't got that.
And she,
You haven't got her name.
yeah.
Name was Heine. How do
Yeah.
you spell that?
H-I-N-E-R.
Right.
She was 42. Now, they had one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7 children.
Wow. A lot of them that we don't know then.
Now there was at that date there was William Yates, 12-year-old.
Right, William.
It's all on here. Why are you writing?
12 years. All right. Well, if you can get it on tape,
That's fine.
yeah.
See,
Okay.
you silly.
She's getting it all down on
Right.
on the tape. So.
Joseph Yates, he was 10 years old. Susan Yates, daughter, 8 years old. Nellie Yates, daughter again, 6 years
What
old.
was that name? Yeah.
Nellie.
Nellie. Right. Nellie.
A George Yates, 4 years old. Edward Yates,
That's
There you go,
my
that's
grandfather.
it.
Yeah.
2 years old.
Right.
And Annie Yates, 1 year old. 1 year old.
No, was Annie, was that Auntie Annie?
Now that must be Auntie Annie.
A-double-N-I-E.
She married George
yeah,
Bunny.
Annie.
Yeah.
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 And
That's right.
that's there's not any. That's it.
Mm. Well, Edward, Edward would be his
Yes.
grandfather.
See, I didn't know who Auntie Annie was, and then Auntie Nora told me that she was grandfather's sister.
Yeah.
So she's the next one younger to him.
Yeah, and she married George Bunny, and she must have married him over here too.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
mm,
But I don't think there's any point in finding any other Yates because
No.
I don't.
No,
think,
that's
Oh, that's
fine.
the
because
only-
they're
That's-
the they're the ones
Yeah.
that I
Mm.
think that I'm pretty certain they're the ones that you are looking
Oh.
for.
that's
Following this visit, Mr. Wakeling drove us to number 10 Danvers Road to meet Mr. Alfred Whitehouse, who lived across the road from the Yates family back in those early years when he was only a lad and they lived in Loughborough Road.
We handed Mr. Whitehouse a copy of a letter he had written 13 years ago, which he read with great interest. He lived with his sister Phyllis and told us he was now 92 years of age.
Is there any date on that?
says that, it's 1987,
Was that
13 years ago.
I fancy me writing that and forgetting it. So good job I'm still alive, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
Made
I,
it
it was
nicer.
quite
13
amazing
years.
because Auntie Nora had told me, she'd given me a copy of that letter and she told me about
We
you.
spent a couple of hours talking about Vern's grandparents and the fact that Alfred's sister Minnie, now 98 years of age, knew Vern's mother in their school days and remembered being envious of her long dark hair.
Very well, because I'm 92.
92.
92, are you?
Wow.
You know, my sister, who would be Marjorie's age, she's 98.
Yes,
But she's
that's
blind.
right. Yeah. George Yates, he lived apparently, this was in the census of 1881, he lived in Mount Sorrel North, on the north end, which is now Loughborough Road. He was a head miller at the age of 38 and was born in Retford, Nottinghamshire. His wife was 4 years older and her name was Heine. They had 7 children at that date in time, and I didn't take down the names, but we have got them, we've registered on the camera there. And apparently my grandfather was the second youngest, and then there was a sister, Annie, who also went to Australia. Now, my grandfather, well, first of all there was my mother, and then there was Winnie, who died, apparently. Then there was Eddie, and Ken, and Nora, and Evelyn.
Vera. You missed Vera.
Oh no, Vera and Norma and Evelyn. And they all went out. My grandmother died here, and,
I remember them.
and Winnie apparently died here, so I didn't know them at all.
No.
There's nothing in the cemetery, is there?
Well, I don't know.
don't
I haven't been to the cemetery, and I doubt whether we'll get there, but in a letter somewhere I found out that somebody, one of these relatives, found the graves, but there's no headstones there, so wouldn't really know where the graves
Well, I don't
were.
suppose they'd be able to afford it anyway in those days.
Probably not, no.
I don't suppose they would. It was a luxury.
Yes, I guess so. I mean, when you were struggling to survive.
My dad's buried down there, but there's no headstone.
No.
But then they do have records of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
where people, they do have records.
Yes,
so
but
But I don't think we'll have time
we
to
won't
find
have
that
time.
out. So,
you don't know if this Mr. Yates, if they were local people. You don't know that, do you? Because I don't. I don't know that. You don't know if he was, you know, the Martzall born and bred, and the family of the Yateses lived in that. You don't know that, or whether they come up from somewhere and just stayed in Martzall for a job or something.
Well, we just
No,
found out a little
the
bit
great
from
grand
Noel.
wasn't that great? Your great
I just got, all I know here is my mother's grandfather was George Yates, whose occupation was a miller.
in 1891.
Well, we just found that out from Noel when that was. He had some records down there, and he discovered that.
So that
Does
would have
it
been
keep-
Marjorie's
then, well,
grandfather.
Yeah, that would be Marjorie's grandfather.
So does it give where he was a miller? Does it state where he was a miller?
Well,
Yeah,
it
it
was
says
in
he
Mount,
was a miller, yes.
in Mount
yeah.
Sorrel.
In Mount Sorrel?
Yeah, but it did say that he'd come from somewhere else. Mr. Whitehouse wrote in his letter that he remembered my mother was engaged to a man named Brown before she and the family left England in 1925.
Yeah, my sister at Corn, they'll be going to church, so someone's ringing her. After knowing you were coming, sure, I would have.
She knew Marge. Well, didn't Marjorie go on Ockin sometime, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I was only a
can
lad.
But you were, I think I read somewhere that my mother was engaged to a Mr. Brown, I think.
I put that something
in
in
that
the letter.
Yeah, I think you had.
Fancy me. I shall catch it.
Yeah.
During our conversation, he told us that the origin of the name Mount Sorrel.
They think that it's from French, Mont Sorrel in France.
Yeah.
They think, which is a town, a village, whatever, very similar to Mount Sorrel, and they think that it came from, it has originated from there, but that's only what they think.
Yes.
That's Mount Sorrel.
Yeah.
We included in our conversation the writing of our life story for our daughter Linda, which prompted him to tell us of his writings of his own life.
When I finished work, I said, I'm going to write my life story. Anyway, I did. and I put it in the bureau, longhand of course.
Yes.
And I put it in the bureau, never thought about it at all. Never dawned on me. Then when the family came at Christmas time, what shall we do with it? I know. Shall I read you something? So I read this, my life story.
And they were astounded.
They were all astounded. Oh, let's get it photoed. They were so interested to see. Ever so interested.
Because we were all together, you see.
We had a
Yes.
rough life when we were children.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I guess
I
so.
can hardly remember our father. You see, he died when he was quite young.
Did he? Right.
Yeah. And there were
So-
10 of us.
Yeah.
There were 10 of us. And my mother
See,
had an
man,
awful struggle.
Big families must have been very hard to.
Emotional
Vern
about it.
spoke to Minnie and her husband on the phone. Her husband remembered Vern's grandfather as the pig sticker. He was a locomotive driver and cleaner at the quarry, but would also slaughter pigs for the community, and he would tell the kids to pull the curl out of the pig's tail while he did the job.
Prior to leaving, we were shown this interesting old picture of the butter market.
A small grassed parkland extends off Leicester Road and is known as the Green or the Village Green. From a statement found in the Mount Sorrel Millennium map, we learned that this park is traditionally the village centre. Bordering this area are a number of fine buildings built of granite, brick and slate materials, and a number of mature trees help to enhance the environment.
There were pumps at the Green and in Watling Street around 1860. This old pump is located on the Green. It was erected there in 1887 to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria.
An interesting piece of history relates to an old building on the Green dating back to the 1600s, which was a weaver's cottage, and a bakery was added later. It changed hands many times and has long since gone, but stories are told of how, even as late as the 1920s, villagers would bring their Sunday dinners, and at times cakes, to be cooked at the bakery for a mere 1.5 or 2 pence each. We slowly walked up to the top of the Green, where a short pan shot shows the extent of this area with the buildings on either side.
At the top of the Green we discovered the old pinfold, where stray animals were impounded in the early 1900s. The night before any cattle were turned out onto the common land, they were required to be branded by the pinfold keeper.
Opposite the pinfold stands Christ Church. Built of Mount Sorrel granite in 1844, its windows and corners were picked out with limestone dressings.
This building was extended in recent years, but Christ Church and St. Peter's School was originally built in 1871. These two parishes eventually amalgamated in 1983.
Continuing down the road, we came to Church Hill Road and the Methodist Chapel. The congregation of the Wesleyan Chapel, which was demolished in 1972, joined with the other two Methodist communities in Mount Sorrel and have worshipped here since this chapel opened in 1970. John Wesley visited Mount Sorrel in 1783 and 1786. He preached in the kitchen of Stonehurst Farm, and as a result of his preaching, Methodism began in Mount Sorrel. The first Wesleyan church was erected here in 1839. William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, was also known to have preached in Mount Sorrel.
We return to Sulby Road, where the Sorrel River is crossed by a wrought iron bridge. The river flows in on the right side of the bridge, where we found several watercraft safely moored at the bank. On the left, the river flows out towards the weir and the open water basin and Echo Bridge.
Looking from the humpback bridge over the canal lock, we focus on the riverbank bed and breakfast building, from whence we viewed these workers cleaning up on the towpath at the side of the canal on the Monday morning. The workers, together with their equipment, travelled by barge along the canal, cutting the grass on the bank and cleaning the canal walls.
There are a number of bollards providing mooring facilities along this section of the river, and we occasionally saw a boat or two tied up here overnight.
Having finished with the ride-on mower, it was now time to get it back onto the barge, so we watched this operation with great interest, as it looked a rather precarious task.
The operation was carried out quite successfully and efficiently without mishap. Obviously, these workers have done this activity many times and are quite confident in their handling of this operation.
While the mower was being secured to the barge, we watched for a while as two other workers set about getting rid of the weeds on the face of the wall using a scraper, and then clearing most of the weed from the water before heading off up the canal.
We decided to go for a walk on the other side of the canal and river. It was drizzling with rain, but it gave us the opportunity to get some views of Mount Sorrel from a different perspective. We were able to video the back of the village centre and get a good look at the weir on the river, with the open water basin into which the river flows. It was just to the right of the water basin that the water mill had stood, together with a small wharf. The mill was a corn mill which ceased operation about 1912 and was demolished in 1960.
In earlier days, boats travelled this canal system carrying road sets, curbing and paving stones from the quarry. However, today canal boats can be seen in abundance making use of this waterway for pleasure.
This impressive single arch brick bridge, built in 1860 and known as Echo Bridge, carried the rail link from the quarry across the valley to the main line. It now supports an endless conveyor in place of the trains. The bridge, with its 90-foot span, is considered to be one of the finest brick-built bridges in the country.
Hidden behind this overgrown creeper are the remains of an old hopper chute, which was used to load granite chippings into narrow boats for transportation to the various road maintenance sites.
The chippings were offloaded from tip trucks into the chute, which was constructed over a brick wall. A small portion of the chute and brickwork between the creeper and the river is all that can be seen of this facility today.
Gates were non-existent in this area, and we found that the old-fashioned style was the only way to negotiate the fences with reasonable ease. This was the highest of the styles along this part of the towpath, but Vern was able to manage it with relative ease despite his hip replacements.
As we looked back through the arch of this bridge, it seemed to be a fitting scene with which to conclude our visit to Mount Sorrel.